G'day guys, and today I want to make a video talking about optics. Sort of want to go into how a particular action or event, no matter how well planned out, how well thought through, how good your intentions were, how noble and such and so forth, how it can turn out and sort of, be a deflated balloon of an event and not be received very positively at all. Now, first of all, we need to obviously state the obvious and say that optics do matter. The perception of a situation is incredibly important. We need to make a distinction first between partisans, non-partisans, and then we'll say anti-partisans. Now, say you do a particular event. Now, the event that I'll bring up first is this recent climate change bit of activism that has occurred in Australia, in which I believe 15 people have abseiled off the Sydney Harbour Bridge. And a little bit before that, I think either a month or two ago, we had a few coordinated animal rights protests across Australia, in which the Melbourne CBD was blocked up, and some people broke into meatworks and stuff like that and chained themselves to the machines. Now, if you're a partisan, if you're really concerned about climate change or you're really concerned about animal rights, you probably think that's a great thing. It looks really good that people are getting out there and championing your message and that sort of thing. But the problem is that's not how it comes off to other people. Now, obviously, that's subjective. Some people would think that's really cool in the sort of non-partisan sphere, but the reaction to these two events has been, I would say, more negative than positive. Because we need to think that a lot of people, aren't particularly opinionated, especially when it comes to animal rights. And then there are some people who, completely the opposite. They don't think there's anything wrong with climate change, or it doesn't exist, or whatever, or they don't really care at all about animal rights, and all those people see is a bunch of vandals. And the group that you really need to convince is the non-partisans. You're not really going to convince anti-partisans to come to your side. The amount of effort that would take is probably useless and wasted most of the time. So what you need to do is, with your actions and your speech, you need to convince non-partisans to become partisans. At least partially. They don't need to become die-hard zealots, but they do need to begin to take an interest in your side, or at least a disinterest in the opposite side. So the problem for me is, as someone who's, on the fence about climate change, I haven't really read into it at all. I don't know if it's made up. I don't know if it's like the worst thing that's happening in this century, as some people believe. And as someone who only takes like a mild interest in animal rights and that sort of thing, it is all fucked up. I've seen some of the slaughterhouse videos, but on the other hand, I think we've got a lot more problems as a society at this point in time, rather than how we treat animals. The suffering of animals is, in my mind, certainly going to be outweighed by the suffering of humans under authoritarian regimes. So what's the problem? The problem is, when I look at an event like this, I don't see, glorious champions of animal rights and activism and that sort of thing. I just see a bunch of trespassers. It doesn't look good to me when people do this sort of thing, and they do crazy shit and they break into places and chain themselves and have to be carried out by police. It just makes them look like idiots. And this, I'm non-partisan. I like to consider myself non-partisan about this sort of thing. We can also talk about how somewhat recently the Karl Marx statue over in the UK, I think it is, was defaced again. And it had graffiti sprayed over it and the marble was smashed. And I don't support that thing at all. Even though I'm utterly opposed to communism, I don't think that anyone who opposes communism should do that sort of thing, because again, it just makes you look violent and unhinged, and that sort of matters to a lot of people, because they look at that and they don't see, of course, glorious individualists striking back against the collectivist menace. All they see is a bunch of vandals. It doesn't look good for our movement, and neither does, breaking into places and doing crazy shit like that. It just makes you look unhinged and stupid. And the problem with looking stupid in this day and age is, as some people find out, unfortunately, your stupid event can be taken by anyone, posted on the internet, and rapidly spread around the entire globe. You can have people all the way over in the United States laughing at these, stupid animal rights activists or whatever. This all can happen in the space of even a few minutes if it's caught, on a live stream or something like that, but certainly within, let's say, a 24-hour news cycle, and then it's there forever. That's the unfortunate thing about the internet. Posts, once they're up there, it's almost impossible to completely scrub them down. Even when the mainstream media tries to backtrack and get rid of articles and flush them down the memory hole, there's lots of programs like the Wayback Machine and individuals taking screenshots and all this sort of stuff. this all means that when we're trying to maintain a good image to the non-partisan public, a good sense of optics, we have to tread very carefully because, say for example, in this video, I make a big blunder with my words. I missay something or something like that. Well, that can be endlessly taken and circulated around the world, and my name can just be, utterly destroyed, and no one will ever want to watch my videos ever again. So that effectively means I have to be very careful when I make my videos and make sure I pronounce my words very carefully. And, sometimes I don't do that, and that's hilarious for everyone who enjoys that sort of thing. Now, when we look at these events in a more general sense, what I personally see is, I won't say the untenable relationship, but the sometimes difficult to manage relationship between idealism and pragmatism. Because if we do something that is merely idealistic, we can be sort of self-destructive in the growth of our movement. When I look at this, activists breaking into places and chaining themselves to things, to them, that's very idealistic. That's something that they really want to do. But if we consider, the growth of their movement, they want people to think these ideas, it's not very pragmatic to break into people's property and chain yourselves and, just be ignorant and stubborn and refuse to do anything. It doesn't look good to a non-partisan to go around doing that sort of thing. So if they want to be pragmatic, they would find other means of communicating their message effectively. And again, as I like to say quite often, it's never been easier to, communicate your message to the world. That's why I have this title card. It has never been easier to fight the darkness. Now, obviously, that's quite an open-ended statement. To some people, the darkness would be the treatment of animals or the state of affairs on climate change and emissions and that sort of thing. But the point that I really want to hammer home is that it's never ever been easier to spread your message. So it becomes less necessary to go out and break into things and abseil off buildings and risk your life and ultimately end up doing nothing. Because as it turns out, I actually know someone who worked in one of these meatworks where it was broken into. And he basically told me that at the end of the day, they'd end up slaughtering all the animals that they were going to slaughter anyway. And all that ended up really happening was that they were delayed for about 45 minutes. Which really sucks. It makes me feel sorry for these protesters because they were sort of in this cloud of idealism and they had all these high ideas, and all that's ended up happening is that nothing's really happened in an ideological sense because, as I mentioned before, the response to this was largely negative. It looks really good to the partisans, but not so good to everyone else because all they see is, again, trespassers and that sort of thing. You didn't actually end up saving any animals, and you've now ended up with a criminal record. It's not a good trade at all. Julian Assange dropping all the WikiLeaks in exchange for, espionage, not espionage charges, but, skipping his bail, that's a better trade. But breaking into some place, getting arrested, getting a record, all for nothing, not a good, very good trade in my opinion. I can absolutely sympathize with these people who are going out and doing these crazy things because, again, I'm sort of similar to them in the more primordial sense in that I have a very strong opinion on something. I really want to, change the way the world works in regards to freedom and liberty and the role of government in society. But if I went around, doing crazy shit like this, it's not going to actually help my movement. So in order to balance my idealism with my pragmatism, I take a more measured approach that makes me more personal to a non-partisan. I try to maintain a demeanor that isn't very off-putting, which is why I think some people are very turned off by Alex Jones because, he's a bit full on, he's a bit, shouty and over the top. It helps sometimes for some people to have a more, gentle incline into an idea, and that's personally what I try to do with my videos. Now, I'm very interested to hear what you have to say about all this. Am I completely wrong if I completely miss something in regards to this topic? What are your thoughts on optics and the perception of the public? Does it not even matter at all? Should you just sort of bulldoze your way through everything regardless of how bad it might look? Because, because of some reason I don't understand. If I have got it completely wrong, please let me know down in the comments below. And as always, thanks all for sticking around and have a good one.